Yo, this is Scott here, uh, talking about buffers. We're here in GIS class, 22nd May. Maybe you're doing pipelines. Maybe you're doing pollution. This is riffing off of Wyatt's map, which is very creative. Um, a- Normally a buffer is simpler, but we're using these EIQ emission points. Technical term, pollution points, uh, communications term, and making multiple buffers around the pollution points to give a feel for a scale 14 map of how close to these things are you if you're in St. John Parish. Similarly, we're working on an ammonia map for Modest. Um, Wyatt produced a 1 mile buffer and a 3 mile buffer from these pollution points. These are for chloroprene. Jasmine's doing ammonia. Other people are doing pipelines. The point today is to go over these buffers, no matter what your source layer is, and make them in the QGIS. So I know there's some projection issues. I have solved that, and I think I'm in NAD 83 or some version of that. NAD 83 UTM 15N, which I think LDQ data or DNR data pushes you in. When we work with state level data, the NAD 83 UTM 15N for Louisiana usually it becomes the projection for your project. So we have point data for EIQ surveys for chloroprene, and we have point data for what is known, I have it as social layers or community care centers here. We're going to make a buffer around the pollution points. Um, we did one at 1 mile, which if I go to my reference sheet, um, PHMSA was talking about a 1 mile buffer at some point, so I ended up making a conversion. You can always check this. I'm making a conversion of miles to meters, meters to degrees. I have another reference for 3 miles, which is a pretty standard EJ air pollution distance. Um, Probably we've discussed in Louisiana, we need a 6 mile for how big the plants are, but we're going to do 3 miles today. Our source layer here, we're doing this crazy kind of, I don't know, horror, Slender Man looking multi-buffer. We're going to produce a 3 mile ring for each of these emission control locations that are emitting large amounts of chloroprene. These are the things you don't want to be close to. And a lot of the big emissions for chloroprene are these wastewater tanks, which is fascinating. This plant is a piece of shit. Um, so we're glad it's shutting down. But once you have your source, you've got your projection, um, you've got your reference in degrees for your distance. And I have a control C. So I have it in the notepad. I'm going to go to processing toolbox, and that opens up the processing toolbox. Um, in the field on the right here, I'm going to search for buffer. And I've done it recently. So it even pops up in this recently used thing that's helpful. You do a lot of things with buffers. One thing I would love to have is that cone buffer, or what is it called? Wedge buffer, uh, for CO2 plumes. I would love to work on that at some point, but we're just going to click on buffer, and you have your source layer, which for our case is these pollution points, And you have your distance, which is in degrees. So we're going to paste that 3 miles converted to degrees number, which is 0.04349, etc. What these other things do, I'm not sure. Sometimes you want to create one buffer per feature in a layer rather than creating, well, and you can adjust that using the this advanced options. Um, or I think what do? You click on this, iterate over the layer, creating a separate output for every feature in the layer. Sometimes you want to do that, not now. I really don't touch any of these other options. And it will create a temporary layer by default. You can also have it saved by default. I just create the temporary and then I save it. And open the output file after you run. Well, let's do it. We've got our 3 mile set up. We're going to run. And it's going to create a polygon, which, is by default opaque. I think what we have to do to recreate why it's aesthetic is then go to properties. This is already kind of yellow, but it's too green. Um, and I'm going to do nothing because I can't click on my menus when Zoom is running. Okay, there it is. Click on the color, select this outline, convert it from blue to yellow. That's such a weird yellow. We do try to work with color blindness rules. I don't know what those are, but for now, so we just changed the polygon to display as an outline. And so that gives us the 1 mile and 3 mile buffers for these, I think, 24 different emissions points. Notice here over in our layers, you just have a layer that says buffered, and I have a layer chloroprene 1 mile buffer. I'm going to right click on that and export, save features as, and I'm going to save this shapefile. Again, I love shapefiles. You may prefer other formats. I'm going to call it the 3 mile buffer for chloroprene. And I'm going to add this new saved file to the map. And you see it has a little like chip insignia for where this is a temporary layer. If you close out of the program, it will disappear. So this is why it's a good thing to save it. So I'm going to remove it. Oh, shouldn't have done that. One thing to do before you delete the buffered layer is to copy the style. I'm just going to copy the 1 mile as an example since I accidentally deleted the buffer. And that way you can copy the style from the buffered layer onto the permanent layer. Now we're just going to go ahead and change that to the yellow color. Apply. So now we have our chloroprene 1 mile and 3 mile buffers, our pollution points. And we're going to make a map zoomed in about yay, showing I think I need to play with the labeling. We're going to add some labels to this in order to make it to pretty it up a little bit and make the communication a bit more clearer. But that's basically how to buffer, and we'll be sharing this around. Peace.